Can you guys see my screen in presentation mode?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
All right, perfect. Cool, great. So I think we already started with one session previously, right? The week before that. So we initially started with module one, where we wanted to know. We started with RPA, business analyst, and we specifically looked into the concepts of business analyst, in our first session. Right, where we understood the nuances and the methodologies, the techniques, the behavioral aspect of what should be done as a business analyst. So overall, we got a broader perspective on the concept of a business analyst, right? And as I mentioned, so here we will be targeting couple of extra courses or modules, as a part of our business analyst course, where we would talk about not only specific something to RPA, but we'll talk about a generic business analyst, we'll talk about agile, and also in the later part of the modules we will be talking more of a from a digital business analyst standpoint. All right, so we'll get started. So this is the second session of our new series, right? So today's session is going to be more into agile. Okay, and we will be understanding that why agile is required, what is the necessity of agile, how does agile work, or what is the requirement or the fitment of agile as a method into the software development industry, right? So and over the period of time we have seen that a lot of interviews, the candidates are being asked about the agile concepts, the agile framework, the agile methods, right? And in today's world the industry is adopting agile culture, and it's not new that it is being adopted for last 2 3 years. I mean, for last probably you can say 10 plus or 15 plus years, agile is has become predominantly one of the framework that the IT industry, specifically the development and the services industry, are trying to follow, in order to have the software development life cycle, right? So we'll start with the first thing. So we'll first of all try to understand what is agile. Okay, so couple of you would have already have worked on it, would have known about it, right? So looking into the screen, can any of you tell if you would have previously worked or read about it, that what does agile eventually do, or how does it help us? Probably if you can share a few things in your words, then we'll get started. Anyone want to volunteer?
Well, I guess I'll try to volunteer. I haven't worked in, or I guess I've never really had to apply the agile concept at any places that I've worked, but basically, I think I understood it from what Paul you've taught before, what it kind of means. But I think it's just the way I understand it. It's well, first of all, I think there's something about how often meetings are held during the process of developing, say, the bot, for example. And then there's steps associated with I guess the bot development. So basically following those processes and keeping up with I guess keeping up with the deadlines, I guess. I don't know if I did it justice, probably
Understood.
not, but
Yeah. No,
yeah.
I understood. So yeah, your eventual description is pretty much close, but I'll make it more clear with the interest of for the interest of everyone, right? So agile is actually termed, there are multiple definitions of agile. If you just google agile framework, you are going to see multiple different types of definition. Someone says it's a framework, someone says it's a methodology, someone says it's a mindset. So it's kind of a mixed and match. So typically what is agile? So we in software industry generally see agile as a framework and as a method that gets adopted into the services industry. So agile is generally defined as a collection of principles that are used in the software development and project management work. Okay, agile is typically also defined or is termed as, okay, there's a question on previous session. please, before we move on. Okay, we'll take the previous session questions at the end. Okay, and let's continue with this session today. Yeah. So agile is a time boxed iterative approach to the software delivery or services or project management that builds software incrementally from the start of the project instead of trying to deliver it all once in one shot. That's how waterfall methods used to work. So what happens in agile is we try to break down the projects into little bits of user functionality, what we called as user stories, and we will learn more in depth about user stories in our upcoming slides. Okay, so what we do in agile, we break down the projects into bits of user functionality called user stories, and then we start to prioritize them and then continually deliver the work to the client in a short sprints, or what we call it as cycles or iterations. Okay, so agile is also defined, let's say, as the ability to create and respond to a change. Okay, it's also defined as a way of dealing with you know uh, with uncertain or unprecedented changes that comes into a development life cycle. Now in waterfall method, which was there in the older IT industry, what used to happen is, people used to companies used to get the requirement from the client. Okay, once the requirement is given, there is no interaction or there is no much of demo that was shown to the client. The team used to work on the software for entire deadline. Let's say the project is of 6 months development life cycle. So within 6 months, the client doesn't have any heck of clue that what is the shaping or how the software is shaping up. At the end of 6 months, once it is developed, the clients are shown with the product. And in that case, let's say after 6 months of time, the client might have feedbacks, they might have changes, right? Then it used to be taken and then we used to rework. So that understood that concept created a sense that, for a period of 6 months, my client is not even knowing that how the tool or the functionalities of the app development is shaping up. Okay, so what happens is after 6 months, when they're giving us a requirement change, we are reworking on it, which is again taking a month. So my development lifecycle span is extending unnecessarily. So that's why the agile technology came into process, where we keep engaging client into in between our development work. And that's why I said in the definition that it helps to break down the projects into little bits of functionality, and we call a term in agile called something called a sprint. So what we do, we plan, let's say the entire development of this project is 3 months. Okay, what we do is we divide this 3 months life cycle into multiple sprints. Let's say 4 sprints. Every 40, 20, 25 days, I set up a sprint with my client. So every 25 days, I would release a portion of the software, show it to the client, and get their feedback. Oh, in that case, what happens? In case if the client has any feedback or the client want any change, it is coming to me then and there. And I, as an agile team, go back and evaluate the change and incorporate this before my next sprint starts. So that's why it is called as an iterative loop, that we are engaging the stakeholders, we are engaging the requirements that are coming in, and we are progressing with the changes that is happening. Okay, so agile is also determined as a mindset. Then what does they need to say about the idea? Okay, what is this concept of methodologies of agile? So it is also defined as a mindset, right? So sometimes what happens is, that mindset does not come up within the team, that they are not open to feedbacks, they are not open to reviews, and that's what agile is trying to bring and change. Okay, so in this is what agile defines to us. Okay, and to understand the agile framework, the project management part of IT industry, right? We know there is a domain in IT which drives with project management. So project management people have also tried to incorporate this concept of agile, so that the management of the project life cycle is very streamlined for them. Okay, so agile also is a part of a project management these days. So agile project management is an iterative approach to project management, to project manage a specific project, that focuses on breaking down the larger project into more manageable tasks, or what we call it as sprints rather, which are completed in short iterations to accomplish the entire project life cycle over the duration of the project. Right now, teams that adopt the agile methodology are able to complete the work much faster. They are adapting to the change requirements that are coming through the way during the course of the life cycle from the client, and they're also able to optimize and the tool with constant feedback and reviews by the client. They're not waiting until the end of the project to get the clients or the stakeholders feedback, right? So that's why project management or project managers these days who are, let's say, PMP certified or Scrum Masters, they are incorporating this project agile methodology within the project, so that it becomes very evident for them to understand uh, this culture. Okay, so agile also allows the teams to have a better equipped to be better equipped with the quick changes, okay, that the direct that the clients are giving. So generally what happens is change management is again a different perspective of IT services industry, where client change requests are being expedited and modified, and then we incorporate those changes what the clients are suggesting in, and make the application of the tool very much better. There's George is saying something. Hey, we are supposed to see the notes or demos as you describe in agile. My screen shows. Are you not able to see my screen which says agile?
No, Paul.
No, it just says
You need
business
to,
analyst.
yeah, you just need to,
Ah, okay. That's a good point then. Sorry. Yeah. Is it there now? Is it
yeah,
there?
yeah. Mhm.
Okay. Okay. So that's the overall concept that I was trying to, explain about the agile getting incorporated into the project management. Okay. So now, considering that, we are having agile as a part of project management, now who uses this agile project management methodology, right? Now, originally, when you look at the creation of the software development industry, the agile approach to project management did not take much time to get adopted by the IT teams. Okay, because they saw that there is a larger benefit, there is a better stakeholder management, there is a better adaptability mechanisms, right? So the transition from waterfall to agile across global industry did not take much time. People were seeing faster results, so many organizations started to get benefit out of the agile project management, as it is very simple to set up and utilize, right? Now in the software world, when a decision to build or further develop an existing technology is made, the end product may be heard to be defined. You need to define what is the end product, so that goal, that objective setup is very much concise and is very much precisely done we using this agile technique. So agile allows for that ambiguity or that flexibility, that your change of direction in which your project is moving needs to be more faster, more adaptive, and it needs to be iterative. Nothing is constant. You need to have an iteration mode so that you can make your application or your software better and better and better. And that can happen only by better user experience, better customer feedback, better stakeholder management and reviews, right? So that's why this entire concept came into picture, and agile getting incorporated into project management is now also being followed into the RPA industry. So when we talk about robotic process automation, yes, in the development of robot development lifecycle, which is a standardized format of software development lifecycle, we are also following agile technique in terms of my robot development lifecycle. So business analysts who are working as a business analyst, let's say for digital technologies or for RPA, should also be aware of how the agile team performs, because within that capability, if you build within yourself, you'd be able to adjust, you'd be able to adapt faster in some companies, or in certain organizations where agile is followed very much precisely and predominantly, and they are I've seen certain organizations where they are very much specific about the agile framework, and they follow it as a bible. right? Now let's understand that, now considering we got to know that what is agile, who uses agile, and how agile is being incorporated with project management. Now let's understand there is a concept of the Agile Manifesto, that if I have an agile, or I do not have an agile before, or I did not have an agile before, now I want to move into agile framework. So what is my manifesto of agile, that what should be my priorities, or what should I set up as my framework? So if you quickly see here on the screen, there are four counterparts that Agile Manifesto defines us. One is individuals and interactions are preferred over my processes and tools. Second, my working software or working service or working product is preferred over a comprehensive documentation. Third, customer collaboration is preferred over contract negotiation. Responding to changes, that's what I was explaining in the previous slide, right? You need to be open to feedbacks, reviews in iterations. Response to your changes are preferred over following any specific plan. Now let's understand each of these components in detail. Now, although processes and tools help to have an appropriate IT service management system in place, okay, I'm talking about the first one. Individuals and interactions are preferred over processes and tools. Okay, so although the processes and tools help to set up your appropriate IT service management system in place, it is the people who actually design, build, run, and continuously improve the IT services in an IT industry, or let's say in an agile team, correct? Now, adapting to this IT service management, there are two aspects to it. The first is, as an industry study, it says, according to certain studies, that 70% of my IT service management projects fail. And what is the reason? Mainly due to the lack of addressing the so-called worst practices in the attitude, behavior, and culture of the agile team, or the organization that you are working on. You're working on. So we talk here about stuffs like resistance to change or no management commitment, which is a very common or a human behavioral aspect. So in Agile, you will see that the interaction that you are doing with different stakeholders, expressing your views, sharing your, exchanging your views and concepts, or the ability of the person, the importance of the employees in that team is always preferred over my different processes that you have. You might have hundreds of tools in your team which is doing your work much more easier, but your people management, or your people importance is very less. Teams are not interacting with each other. That doesn't make sense in an agile framework. Okay, that doesn't make sense. So in agile, the priority is already is always given to individuals and interactions. I will have my processes, I will have my tools to help me with it, but my priority will be always the people, the way they interact, the way they communicate. Okay, so that's how it happens. Second, what we were trying to understand is working services or working products or softwares over comprehensive documentation. Now what does that mean? Now at the end of the day, it's the IT service which delivers the value to the customer. Now if I have to develop a software and hand it over to Bob, for which he's paying me a certain amount of money, right? So me as an individual or as an IT organization, I would get customer value from Bob only when I deliver the product to him based on his requirement, based up to his expectation, and the tool or the application that I'm developing is able to solve the purpose for which he has got it developed. Correct? So if I, let's say, develop a software which is half baked and half cooked, it is not meeting 100% of Bob's requirement. It is meeting 70% of his task. But what I've done, I have given him an extensive documentation that this application is doing this application is doing that. This is the way you have to use it. But eventually, when he's trying out multiple features, he says, you know what? It's not working, Paul, this is failing, that is failing, but your documentation says this is working and this is how the tool is behaving. So this is, of course, a heavily depends on a good strategy, design, transition, and my ability to run the application development service and hand it over, right? So although documentation is necessary and useful, right? Now if I'm developing an ERP, an enterprise resource planning software like Oracle or SAP, right, and I'm handing it over to Bob, I eventually need to give him some documentation, some SOP, standard operating procedure document, that how this software runs, where he needs to click, where he needs to load his document, right? So documentation is necessary and useful, but in Agile, it cannot overtake my working product or software that I have given him. Okay, so documentation would have its priority, but if it should not oversee the software itself that I have developed. So in most cases, that happens in non-agile, or let's say even in agile framework. So that's why agile method constantly focuses on value that you bring to your customer. So in agile, it is never the documentation which is the end result. It is the measurable, improved situational and the working software which I want to develop and achieve, and is what is described and handed over to the client. Okay, so in agile, the value is delivered in an incremental and iterative way. Incremental and iterative, why? Because I am developing the product in sprints, slowly and gradually. Iterative, why? Because I am taking the feedbacks and the opinions of my stakeholders and constantly trying to improve it. Now in such cases, you know uh, it's an illusion that you believe that the customer already knows exactly from the beginning what its requirement. That is also a factor. Some customers will have a requirement, but they also doesn't know by themselves that what exactly they need. Now let's say Bob is coming to me and saying, hey Paul, I need a tool which is able to set up all my meetings automatically. Now he knows that he needs an application that would be able to set up his meetings, but he is also not clear from his side that whether that application should integrate with his Outlook, that application should be able to integrate with his Gmail account, that application should be able to integrate with his Appstack America account. He is not clear about that part. He just needs a tool, right? So in such cases, at times, requirement gap is also a factor. So that's why it says that it's an illusion in IT services or development industry that your customer knows exactly what they need. That is also an illusion to us, right? So you have to show that this is what, based on the requirement, we are understanding that can be developed, right? And the more I probe Bob about his idea or his requirement, he would give me answers to the questions. And as a software expert, it's my responsibility to probe more questions to him and understand his requirement, and eventually return him a software or a developed tool that actually needs his purpose, right? And after using it, he should be like, oh, you know what, I did not think about it, but this is really cool, it's making my life easy, right? So that's how, on a client level or at an organization level, industries or firms are thinking these days, and that's coming from agile. Right now, when you talk about working products, customer behavior, customer interaction, stakeholder management, everything that is coming here, you cannot keep aside a concept called, in agile, I would give priority to customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Right now, let's say I'm making a contract with Bob for this software development, right? And we have a lot of negotiated terms in terms of development, in terms of time, in terms of commercials that he's going to pay, in terms of support and change that I as a firm wanted to give him. All these things comes into a contract, correct? Now, if I stick to the contract only and doesn't give value to the requirement that my client is bringing, I'm not fitting into the agile. So agile says that your customer collaboration, your stakeholder feedback, your stakeholder review, your stakeholder value is what is prioritized over what is written in your contract or in your contractual negotiations. That is there for the legal aspect, right? But in order to establish your customer satisfaction, your CSAT, correct? Your customer collaboration needs to be improved. That's why you will see that most of the e-commerce platforms and any other software industries, they started B2C, business to client industries. They are now keeping individual customer engagement managers who would call you up. Recently I opened a bank account with opened a bank account in a new bank, and automatically, couple of days back I got a call, from their customer success manager. And the lady was asking me, hey, I see that you have opened a new account. How is the services? Are you enjoying it? Do you have any problem? Did you submit all your documents? Blah 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 blah. Why? They wanted me to have a better collaboration as a customer. That's the idea that Agile brings. Okay, so customer collaboration over contract management. So it's not only that I have a customer who is unhappy because, but still, I'm following each and every word that is there in my contract. I'm fulfilling my SLA, but eventually my customer is unhappy. That's a very familiar concept in IT industry. So we all know about the importance of having SLA in its place. SLA is nothing but service level agreement, that if I agree that I would develop the software in 4 months of time, I need to do it, right? That's how the contractual negotiations are with me and my client, right? So measuring the service level agreement and not going with customer value is not what is followed in Agile. So there's no way around that. Your customer collaboration is deprioritized in Agile, and you are more getting into contractual KPIs and everything. Yeah. Okay, right. Next, the fourth one is responding to change. Now, what is that? Now, as I said, that when you get into the requirements of a software development, right, as a business analyst, when you are talking to your client, you would eventually get to understand that what the client needs, right? But let's say, when I was talking to Bob about his software requirement, he told me that, Paul, give me a software that is able to integrate with my Gmail account. I said, okay. So that's how my, requirement understanding happened with Bob. And then I started to work on the software development. Now, what's happening is, after 2 weeks of time, when I showed him a glimpse of the tool, and I told him that, Bob, it's only work with your Gmail, you'll not be able to integrate your AppStack America account. Then he's like, oh, what? No, I need to integrate that as well. I get mails, I schedule my meetings in my, not only in my Gmail, but in my official account. But initially what happened, he gave me the requirement that he needs it only to his Gmail setup. He did not mention me that, he needs it in his AppStack America setup as well. Now when I'm showing him a piece of demo or a piece of the tool, a part of the tool, he is now shifting gears and changing his requirement and stating that, I need it for integration with my AppStack official account as well. Now that's what is called a requirement change. Initially, he came up to me with a specific need, right? But over the journey, or the course of time, he understood that, what, this is also better for me. Add this. Now what happens is, as the moment he gives me this requirement, I need to evaluate that whether this requirement is doable within the agreed timeline. How big is that change? Okay, and this change management, we will talk more about it when we get into the RPA side of the module, because in the RPA domain, or the modules that we are going to read ahead, we will talk extensively about this change requirement, what is this change management strategy and all, right? Now, but as a strategy, what I would do is, I will quickly evaluate that how big is that change. Is it just a replacement of the Gmail to an AppStack account, or do I need to code something more extensive to make this change incorporated, right? So based on that, I would give my response, right? Now, either I would reject or I would approve. What I would say is, generally, services industry, they don't reject. They say, okay, if I have to get this new change done, my timeline would stretch from 5 weeks to 7 weeks. And generally client also understands, and they would agree, right? And then we incorporate that change into my plan, into my development life cycle. So you need to be open in order to response, or in order to respond rather, in order to respond to the changes that the client is giving. Now, in a current market state, what happens is, in which customer requirements, available technologies and the patterns of the business keeps changing. And it is essential that you have an approach, in at least in the services driven industry, that your design and transitions are adaptive, in order to incorporate any change, and also your development life cycle is not impacted that much. So that's the potentiality that response to changes bring. So your solution, that's why what happens is in today's industry, when developers are coding, they try to make the development code as dynamic as possible. Now let's say I'm making a calculator which is able to add two numbers. Now let's say if I specify that if you give first number as 2 and second number as 2, then only it will give you 4 as an output. Now that kind of a calculator, is it worthy? No. Why? Because I have specified my input that first number needs to be 2 and the second number needs to be 3. That means apart from 2 and 3, if I give any other digit like 6 and 7, the tool is not going to work. Correct? So if I specifically define an input, my tool capability is constrained or confined. Now let's say instead of specifying this, I say that okay, I'll develop a calculator. If you give any first number and you give any second number, both of them will be added and given you the result. Now that makes sense, right? In that case, you can give 10 as your first number and 20 as your second number, and the output should be 30. Whereas in the first case, if I confine my tool that, it will only take single digit number, and also it will take, between 0 to 9. The moment you give 2 digits number, the application would crash. So what is happening that when I'm developing a calculator, I'm pretty much stuck to one. I did not explore that someone can enter 2-digit number also, right? I designed the tool that it only takes 1-digit number. The moment somebody gives 2-digit number, it says, requirement not satisfied or input is invalid, right? We see certain applications where we get certain errors, right? You would see when you try to set up your password, in certain portals, they give a password requirement. Unless and until your password is mapping that requirement, it will not accept, right? Now that is not a confinement. That is why that what they have done here is they want you to follow a specific format. So people can keep zigzag passwords, inadequate passwords which they don't want. So they are restricting the user to keep a certain amount of input, but that's also for a better cause, so that people doesn't mess up with different combination of password. So that's what is the entire Agile Manifesto, where it tells me that what should I prioritize over what. All right, so is there any question before we move on to the next slide?
Yes, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
So how as a business, how do you know whether, or what do you do if a customer goes, okay, so say for example, that I the customer requested that I wanted you to integrate a software with my Gmail account, right? Like you were saying, but then decided, oh, well, could you also integrate it with, say, my Yahoo? So let's say that to add the Yahoo account, it would actually be, I guess, more cost to the customer. So
Correct.
I guess my confusion is, so we have, as a for Agile framework, you have to be flexible. But where do you draw the line so that the
See,
customer
yes,
knows, oh, you have to pay more for this or something like that?
absolutely, very good question. Now see, so you first came up with Gmail, but then you also wanted it with Yahoo. Now you as a customer, you don't have the technical expertise to understand or decide how much it is technically doable or feasible. Correct? That's why you have come to me. Now what I
Correct.
would do is first I would listen to your requirement. Then I as a technical expert would eventually know that can I do the same integration with Yahoo? Is it possible? Now Yahoo is also a different service, third party service provider. Now does Yahoo allow such kind of integration?
Right.
I cannot go and break Yahoo's protocol as I was able, because Gmail would have given me a certain criteria, to integrate the software with your, integrate the Gmail with your software, but Yahoo might not be allowing me. Yahoo might have its own different security protocols, correct? So
Correct.
in that case, after my analysis, I would say that, hey, Daisy, this is not possible because these are the reasons. Yahoo does not allow any open software to connect to its network. So only Gmail allows it. So that's not possible because we cannot go and break Yahoo's protocol. Right. So that response has to come from me. So the line to draw that you are asking is about the feasibility study that a technical expert needs to do on the change that has been suggested, and get back to the client and tell what is feasible, what is not. If it is feasible, then I will tell you, then my answer will be a yes, I can also do it with Yahoo. But the fact is that it would take me 2 weeks more of development time, and it would, let's say, cost you $2,000 extra because I need to pay Yahoo for the service license.
Okay. Okay. So it's never like, I guess the customer does not always get an immediate response. You will have to do the
No, see,
analysis first and then,
no, it's not
respond.
like, no, it's not like that. See, when you talk to
Okay.
somebody who is technical expert, now if it is a work that I already know it is not possible, I can
Mm-hmm.
upfront say you that, hey Daisy, this requirement is not possible. Based on my experience and expertise, Yahoo does not allow an integration with an open tool. So
Mm-hmm.
it's gone then and there. But if I don't know, and before giving a statement, it's my responsibility to go and do the due diligence and then come back to you. But if as a technical architect I know that's not possible, I will tell you upfront that this is not possible. Rather, same thing we can do with Rediffmail, or we can do with Hotmail or Outlook, but we cannot do this with Yahoo because Yahoo's protocol does not allow me to integrate your calendars.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
So that's how your discussion happens. So that's how your technical analysis of the requirement goes in. It's not that if your client is asking you to make a rocket, you will make it instead of NASA or Tesla, right? It doesn't work that way. Yep. Any other questions from anybody?
Paul, I have a question.
Yes, Bella.
So my question is where you mentioned like probably where under Agile, client will probably be more focused on working services or product rather than like documentation. But doesn't that like go hand in hand so that somebody knows what's working and what's not working? So when they go back on the drawing board or they're doing their reviews, they're actually able to go back and check, oh, this is what we did and this is what worked or this didn't work. Because like from my industries that I've worked, whether it's in the health sector or the financial sector, I know they say if you didn't document it, you didn't do it. So how does that work?
Absolutely. Very good question. Now see, if you would have noticed, Agile does not tell you that you do not do documentation, right? It never tells you do not do documentation. Yes, you need to document. That's what I said in my statements, right? You need
Yes,
to
you
have,
did say that.
yes, but it says that your documentation should not overtake your service.
Okay.
Okay, it's here, it's more about what I am prioritizing. So in Agile, my software or the product that I'm developing would get more importance, that its functionality is appropriate based on your requirement and it is apt, rather than I give you the documentation. Now let's say I give you a half-cooked application and I've given you 10 documents to just run this half-cooked document app, right? So what did you feel? That Paul has given me 10 different documents to read, but eventually his product does not work. So
Okay.
in that case, what I have done is my priority of the product was less, but more was on documentation. What Agile says is make your product more functional to the requirement, more apt, more fine-tuned,
Yeah.
and give relevant and necessary document for the client stakeholder management. It does not say don't give documents. Yes, you would give, but your importance or focus would be not to create an extensive documentation. Yes, you will create, but if you are creating an extensive documentation, you need to also ensure that your product is also working extensively, right?
Okay.
If I'm
Yeah. Right.
if I'm mentioning 20 features in my documentation about my service application, then those 20 features should independently work, right? It's not that 10 features are working, 10 are not working, and I've told you that 20 features are extensively working in my documentation. So that is not the concept. It's not that you don't do, it's the priority, it's overtaking. So product or service would overtake your documentation, not telling you that you completely scrap it off.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
All right.
Great. All right, so
I have
any
a
other
question.
questions?
Yeah, I do.
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, so according, when you talk about using the agile methodology or the framework, does that mean we as business analysts, are we testing the software from the development cycle, or are we actually developing the software according to the requirements of the customer?
Okay, see, that's a bit of a different question. So agile, as I was explaining, is the framework or the method that you follow. Now, in your software development lifecycle, now what is the software development lifecycle? Your software development lifecycle is driven by the concept of agile. Okay, your software development lifecycle is still there. Now, what are the phases of your software development lifecycle? It starts with requirements gathering, it starts with designing and solution, then it comes with development and programming part, then it goes for testing, right? Once the testing is done, then it goes for quality check. After quality check, it goes for production deployment, or your application goes live. So these are the 7 phases of my software development lifecycle. Right now, these phases of my cycles are driven by agile as a framework. So agile is sitting on top of my software lifecycle so that I'm able to independently drive each phases. Now, that does not mean that you will only do development, not testing. No, software lifecycle does not come up like this. Software lifecycle includes your development, your testing, your go live, everything together as a individual phase, right? So agile just helps you to manage these phases individually, so that you don't mix up, so that you set up the priority, so that you understand the feedback from the client, you understand the requirement, you develop the tool properly, you go through proper testing, proper quality check, and then you deploy the tool. It's not that it does not tell you that you do development, you don't do testing. No, agile is not that. Yeah, makes sense.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so let's move on to the next slide. So now let's talk about the elements of agile project. Now, if I, as a business analyst or as a program manager, if I'm working on an agile project, right? So what are the elements of agile projects I need to understand? What are the things that drives my agile projects? Okay. So first of all, let's understand the certain techniques that are very predominant in my agile framework. Okay, so first we'll go through each of them. So the first one is a backlog management. Second is backlog refinement. Excuse me, backlog refinement. Third is prototyping. Then we have wireframes, personas, and user stories. So these are the certain techniques or aspects that I need to bring in into my agile project management. Why? As we initially spoke in the first slide about the project agile project management. Now, how do I bring in the taste of agile? If I integrate these techniques in my project management, then I would say I'm following the agile framework, and I would usually see the benefit out of it. That how my project entire project management life cycle is getting improvised or is getting enhanced with these techniques. Now, what is a backlog management? An agile backlog is a prioritized list of feasible features, bugs, technical works, and knowledge acquisitions needed to meet the desired functionality in the product. So your backlog is the roadmap for your product eventually. Okay, let's say I need to develop 10 features within 1 week of time. Now, due to some constraint, I was only able to develop 2 features within 7 days. That means with respect to my timeline, I am having 8 features as my backlog. Right? Now, Agile helps you to manage these backlogs with certain certain processes and techniques. So a product backlog is also defined as a prioritized list of work of the development team or for the development team that is derived from the roadmap and its requirements. The most important items are shown at the top of your product backlog so that the team knows what they exactly need to deliver fast. Okay, so we prioritize all the backlogs and then we arrange it, let's say, in an ascending order, so that I know that my first priority is my this task, then the second task, then the third task. Eventually I rank it out. Now, what is the benefit if you eventually conceptually introduce backlog management? It will help you to understand your work items better, that what exactly is pending with the due course of time, right? How your work items in the project or in that sprint is described, and how effectively you are tracking each and every component. Now, what happens, I'll tell you. Let's say you are the business analyst or the project manager of a team of a project where there are 10 developers. 10 developers are working in a software development project. Now every developer has their individual task list, or what we call it as user stories. We'll understand it in the coming slides. So let's understand it now with the word called task. Okay, so 10 developers have their timelines to complete their individual task. Let's say every developer has 10 tasks to complete in the next 7 days of this sprint. So 10 developers, everyone has 10 tasks. That means 10 multiplied by 10, 100 tasks needs to be completed as collectively within 7 days of time. Now what's happening is, let's say out of 10 developers, when you do an assessment, you understood that 7 developers have managed to complete all the 10 tasks, whereas 3 developers individually are unable to complete. Someone is unable to complete 4 tasks, someone is back lagging behind by 6 tasks, someone else is lagging behind by 3 tasks, right? Now when it's a 10 members team, and your 10 tasks are getting multiplied to 100, still you are struggling to manage who is lagging where, which developer, how many tasks are being backlogged. Now if I just increase the number of the team to 50, let's say 50 developers are working in 50 different projects, and there are 3 to 4 business analysts or program managers managing it. 50 developers, 50 projects, 50 different tasks, and everybody has their own timeline, and everybody is at a different stage. Just level up the complexity, right? So in that case, if you do not have a proper backlog management, you will not know which developer is where. Because in Agile, what I said is we divide the entire task into small pieces. That's why, let's say I have to develop a software. I have kept 10 developers. There are 100 tasks to accomplish the entire development. For 100 tasks, I have kept 10 developers, and I have given them 10 tasks individually. So the software will only be complete when these 10 people individually complete their 10 tasks. That means then if I sum up, it will be 100. If at least one person is lagging behind, let's say one developer was able to meet only 5 tasks, then when you still sum up, you are at 95%. Your 5% is still left. So that's where Agile comes into picture. That's where, when you break down your requirement into bits and pieces, into subtasks or into sub processes, and at the end, when your sub processes are complete, you accumulate them. You saw the jigsaw puzzle, right? You have bits of pieces, right? You collectively set the puzzle together, and then your design is ready. So each of your puzzle block is a sub process, right? So then when you accumulate it, your entire design gets ready. The similar concept is here, right? So even if one of your puzzle block is missing, let's say you are trying to draw, your puzzle eventually would make the image of let's say Joe Biden. Now let's say one of the eye and one of the ears in the puzzle is lost. Even though you accumulate all the pictures, your puzzle's 2 items are missing. That means the picture is incomplete, right? Similar concept is here. So everyone needs to complete their task 100% accurately. Then only when you sum up, your total number would be eventually 100. You will say that my software is ready. So to track everything, your backlog management is very, very, very important in an Agile method. And Agile tells you as a part of the definition that do a proper backlog management. Okay. Next is backlog refinement. So backlog refinement is actually an ongoing process in which the product owner and the development team collaborate to ensure that their items are defined in the backlog management. Now let's say, what is backlog refinement? You able to understand a requirement today, and you are working on it, right? Now let's say today, when you estimated 2 developers out of 10 developers, let's say, are behind by 3 tasks, 3 each. So six tasks of yours are in the backlog strategy. So you need to go and act upon it, right? You might need provide them additional help. you might allow them some additional time frame to reassess everything. So your refinement of this backlog is done. So in short, your backlog refinement is about creating shared understanding on what the product will and what the product won't do. If someone is, let's say, you ask someone to create a calculator, he is now, on the direction of creating an entire software, right? We don't need that. So sometimes you supersede the requirement. That is also not good. So your backlog refinement would help you to understand that what the product exactly wants to do, what's your requirement, what you should not do, and on the effort side, how much time it would take for you to implement it, and in and the order in which you will do your task, right? So at times your ranking of the task or prioritization of the task is also very important. So this refinement is nothing but analyzing your backlogs and then strategize. So talk to your team. That's why it says refinement. What happens in backlog refinement? First, I will list out the backlogs in an ordered way. Why ordered way? First backlog is my first priority, last backlog is my last priority. That's why we call it as an ordered list. Ordered list means I'm ranking up something. Okay, then what I'll do, I'll take the backlog items, then I'll go by item and individual items. An item or a backlog which represents one or more requirement is called as a backlog item, right? Then I'll do the refinement meeting. The output of this refinement meeting is that the backlog items are ready for its next iteration to be worked upon or to get completed. And what is definition ready? I'm setting the criteria that the team agrees and must be satisfied in the next iteration so that my backlog is out of my, so the task is eventually complete. That means it is no more a backlog. I'll mark it as completed. So these strategies, if you are seeing somewhere when you are working, let's say you've joined the firm newly as a BA, but you see these accomplishments are happening, this is how they're driving their project. Stay silent and understand that this is the agile environment in which you are working. If you don't see anything like this, you might feel that okay, there is agile, but it might be in black and white. There's nothing in real that agile is being worked upon. Okay, now what is the next technique? The next technique is a wireframe design. Wireframe fits perfectly with the agile mindset. Why? Now wireframes are nothing but, let's say when I get a requirement from Bob that I need to develop an application that sets up his meetings, the moment I start designing the solution, the first thing is I need to create a wireframe that how this application should eventually look like, the visual aspect of it. So wireframes generally what it does is the moment you have in wireframe, as you can see in the diagram, the moment you go to Amazon, you go to Walmart, you go to Best Buy on the e-commerce platform, just see how they describe their products, how they visually keep the frames, the photos, the models that wearing the dress, that watch, that iPhone someone is holding, that entire concept is visually appealing. So someone is designing that wireframe, right? That's how it is there. So if you go to any online shopping cart, you will see that they will have the category as you see here on the image, right? See, they will have the category, they will have the product name, then there will be the picture, right, where will the image will be there, correct? The image will be here, and then you will see the name of the product, and then you will see the pricing. So that's the layout of my wireframe. So whenever the moment you have in wireframe, you are able to visualize that this is what I'm planning to develop. Then the developer who is coding it in the backend will also know that how his code should work. Okay, so it encourages the team members to actively communicate and work together across different disciplines. It also results in very lightweight, easy to digest wireframe diagrams instead of verbose or comprehensive documentation. Now let's say without giving this diagram, I write this wireframe into 30 50 to 100 lines. I write something like this and give it to you. Will it be appealing to you? You will mess up, right? You need to, every time you work as a developer, you have to go and read the requirement of 100 lines that I've given to you. Rather, if I create a wireframe and give it to you, visual aspects attract people's attention and brain perfectly, faster. right? So you just need to look at this design and then start programming rather than reading 100 lines of documentation. So that's how, the lightweight or easy to digest wireframes or diagrams are developed in the backend for the development team to make the design process easier or faster. All right. Then it also allows for an iterative approach, bringing in the rough sketch and then you evolve it to the final design. This might not be my final design. This might be my rough sketch, the first sketch that I have done. Next, I might say that, okay, category should not be here. Category should come here. These lines should not be here. This line should come at the bottom. This image should go a little upward in my website. This description of the product should be in this much size and font. The price should be this way and it should be marked bold and red, right? So when you talk about software development, people who work on website development, right, visually they need to present something, so that much concisely they think, right? When you work in an RPA developer, RPA project, you might not be working into the core software part, but if you are going, enhancing your career and working on a project, you should know all these concepts, that yes, I fit not into an RPA, but I can also handle a normal software development lifecycle project. I can handle a digital artificial intelligence or machine learning based project as well. So that's the intent of our program this time, right? So it is very important that you create up your wireframes or designs. Any questions on this before we move on to the next?
Yes, I have a question. So the backlog, so with the backlog, are you talking about like software such as Trello, or is it not always a software used by a company?
You're talking about the tool that you use for backlog management?
Yeah.
There are multiple tools,
Okay.
many organizations follow different tools. Some organization uses Jira as their
Okay.
agile tool to log everything so that they can track. Some company uses a part of ServiceNow is also there, which helps in tracking. Some companies uses GitHub. GitHub gives
Oh,
you
okay.
the
Yes,
flex.
yes.
Generally if somebody is a technically developer or a technical project manager, he or she will prefer GitHub, where they will create all the list of backlogs and then they'll start tracking with respect to the timeline. There is something called as Microsoft Azure DevOps, where Azure
Okay.
also gives you the flexibility of creating a project charter and put it with respect to timelines, and then you can define what's your backlog, how much you want to accomplish this week. You can define your sprint. So all these concepts are now not being done through your Word or Excel. There are a lot of tools in the market which helps you to replicate these processes faster. Like if I can name few: Jira, GitHub, Microsoft Azure DevOps, ServiceNow, and then there are a couple of others in the market
Oh, thank you.
that helps you to manage the project backlogs. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. All right. So next is what? So after wireframe, it's more about agile prototyping. Okay. So what is prototype? Prototype is nothing but it's a minimal viable product. Now let's say I'm creating a software robot which is able to read all your mails, and then if there is any requirement of setting up a meeting, it takes the user ID, goes to your Outlook, creates a meeting request, sends it, and intimates you that your meeting is scheduled for this time, this date with this person. Now let's say that's the task. Now what do I mean by a prototype? Now if this is your business idea, right, I as a technical expert need to develop and show you something. So I would take this entire requirement, okay, and let's say I will your mailbox will have 2000 3000 emails, right? What I'll do is, let's say I take a Gmail account, I'll have one mail in my inbox. I will try to read that mail, understand who is the sender, take the sender's ID, go and create a mail and shoot the email out and notify you. Now, this entire concept of reading different folders is my holistic requirement. Now, when I create a prototype, it's a minimal viable design that I will create and show it to you. So that means I'm making a cost-effective technique or a faster executable technique to show you that this is how your idea is going to work, or this is how your overall solution is going to work. All right. So what happens is we execute a faster strategy or design to discover the user needs, maintain the focus on what is the priority, and we let the user feel that okay, this is how the work is going to be done through this software. Right. So that's what is prototyping. A version of your design with enough functionality to compare the design's alternative and to test what exactly my requirements are, and are that part being working upon this tool, or that element of design is working or not, is what is prototype. Why it is created? Prototypes are actually rapid prototyping techniques, which is to show you that this is how your work is going to be. So it allows you to observe the real tool behavior, right? You would be able to interact with that application, see the look and feel of it, share your feedback. Oh, you know what, this is great. Oh, you know what, I think this should be changed. So that's what is called prototyping. It's the minimum viable product that I'm showing you to make you understand that this is how your product is going to work. Now there's one more aspect to it, is what is the cost and the time frame, right? Now, obviously, the cost of developing a prototype is much lesser compared to the cost of developing the entire software, and also the time frame, right? So cost and time frame are the two additional factors which gives an edge that I create a first prototype and show it to you. So if you see any new product that is getting launched into the market, what they do, they create a prototype and send it to your house. Probably, let's say if it's a consumable product, right? Let's say if you are buying a iron, if you're buying, let's say, anything, a gadget, so you want to get the look and feel of this new product. So time required can be anything which is very minimal, from let's say based on the type of product that you are designing, and the cost is very minimal. So once you get the feedback from the customer, then I will go and get started with my full-fledged product development. So that's what is called prototyping, which is also coming from the concept of agile. The second is in user story. Okay, so here user story is nothing but, in agile, a user story is a short, informal, or a plain language description of what a user wants to do within a software product to gain something that finds value. Now let's say if I'm creating an application which is able to read your mails and create a meeting invite and send it, now I can divide this entire requirement into short user stories. First would be, my application should log into your mailbox or should log into your Gmail or Outlook account. That's my first user story. Okay. My second user story is, once it is logged in, it will now go to the inbox folder and read all the mails that are there. That's my second user story, right? My third user story would be, then it would identify from all the mails wherever there is a meeting invite that needs to be sent, right? My fourth user story would be to identify the sender's email address, right, to which I need to send the meeting invite. My fifth user story would be to draft the email with the meeting invite. My sixth or seventh user story would be to send out the mail to the recipient with successfully, is my seventh user story. And my eighth user story, which completes my requirement, is notify me that this is the meeting scheduled with this person at this time. So what I've done, the entire requirement that I have is broken down into several pieces, and each piece is my user story in Agile. Now, each user story, when I club together, I create my entire product, right? So that's what is called as invest criteria. So it is independent, negotiable. That means you discuss with the requirements with the client. It brings value. It is estimable, that I would be able to complete it with this duration of time. The requirement could be small, generally in invest criteria, and it is testable, that I'm able to test this product. Now that's one concept. The second way, how do we look into user stories, is typically it's the role feature benefit pattern. So I break down my requirement into short user stories, what I want at this part, an action, and then what is the benefit or the value that is going to get out of it. So the smallest unit of work in Agile is in that we set up is a user story and is a key to my incremental development. So when I sum up all these user stories, my overall project criteria would be established. Now, there are certain common or classic mistakes that people do with these user stories. What are they? Right? So first of all, starting from a requirements document, right? When we get to understand what's the requirement, created in a non-agile way, we end up into different uninterrupted user stories. That means if my requirement gathering is wrong, my user story definition would be wrong. Now, let's say in that entire user story, which I told you for creating an application to set up my meetings invite, let's say I misunderstood as I was evaluating the requirement, I misunderstood that the mail, the notification also needs to come to me. Let's say this piece itself is out of my requirement. So when I define my user story, my eighth requirement that a notification should come to me is gone. That user story is not there because that was not captured as a part of my requirements gathering, right? So that's the mistake, right? So a detailed requirement or a validated requirement is very, very important. So that's why your user stories should be very much customer focused. It should be requirement specific. Your developers, testers, business professional, everybody should be a part of it to understand that it's correct, right? So the conversation is essential so that your collaboration is not impacted. All right. And the last one that you need to understand is personas. That's actually a methodology, but you need to know. But I personally feel that this is not that predominantly gets implemented in corporates or industries. So user persona is a detailed, real or hypothetical description of a typical end user of the product the team is developing something. So personas usually take the form of a written document with a photo, the name, the convenience, and the entire personification of who is going to use that tool. So Agile tells you that an effective Agile designer generally should work in that, but I haven't seen that this is getting implemented at an industry level. But just for the knowledge purpose, you might end up working in some project where you will see that they are identifying who are the end users who is going to use this tool, and they're creating the user persona. Then you will be like, oh, I did not learn this in my training, right? You'll be astonished. So just for the knowledge purpose, you should know that there is a concept where Agile designers and developers use personas as guidance when developing a product that fits the need of the specific type of end user or multiple types of end user. The development team may use personas to decide whether to add specific features, interactions, or visual clues to the product. Okay, now let's say when iPhone is getting designed, they do this personas because iPhone users vary from age of 10 5 10 plus to 60 plus, right? Different age category people uses iPhone as a product. Now every age category of people have a different perspective or has a different level or has different utilization of using an iPhone, right? So this persona identification in a core product development company, this persona identification you might not see in a service based industry. Okay, but if you work for a product based company like Apple, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, IBM, right, where they create products, they get into this fictional characterization of personas, that how can I diversify my end users? Is it can be based on age, it can be based on location. Generally the people in US, how they use an iPhone might vary from the people in India of how they use an iPhone, right? So they do that kind of a personification due diligence to get into the level of analysis that what should I keep as the feature in my product and what should I remove. That's why they say that Windows as an operating system is much more easier and fits into every age group compared to Mac OS. So Mac OS as a personification, the study says that it is fitted for people who are more technically sound, because the user experience, the UI UX is a little more complex and highly defined compared to the Windows operating system, which is open to any age group, and even if you're not technically sound, somebody who is non-technical and never uses a computer could also eventually use a Windows operating system, right? So that's how the personification happens, and that comes from Agile. So it increases the awareness that who are my end users. So based on that, what features should I put in my product? So it gives you a more focused, realistic, and streamlined product goal. And developers can determine more easily that what they should keep in the product and what they should not. Right? So most of the features you will might not see abruptly when you work for an organization, but you, let's say if you're working first for a service-based industry, you might not see this personas identification at all. So if you go into a product-based companies like Apple, you might see that they're doing this persona based identification of the product analysis. So, we are trying to cover up the concepts, but the fitment or the utilization you might not find everywhere. Somewhere you might find into bits and pieces, but you as an individual or you as a business analyst should know everything in detail. So even if you work for a product company 10 years down the line, you should know that there's a concept in Agile which says persona define or definition, where I map user personas that who are going to use my product. All right. So yep, I think with this we conclude today's session. Before any questions before we get into the assignment part? Any questions on the entire module that we discussed today?
Okay, I have one silly question.
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
think it's silly. So the
No,
persona, the
Mhm.
persona is really just a profile that's available to so the I guess the business that's trying to develop the bot, right? It's not visible to the customer per se. Is that correct?
Sorry, could you repeat the question? I missed it in the middle.
I'm just asking. So the persona is a profile that's I guess, for lack of a better word, visible to the people creating the product. So developers, business analysts, not necessarily a profile that the customer can see in the end product. Is that correct?
No. It's not about in you as an iPhone user. You will not know that whether Apple analyzed you as an user category and created a persona for
Okay.
people like you who would be using. So that's what the diversification is, right? So this business analysis team would eventually do it for the benefit of the product development. End user might not be knowing. Apple would not pick you and me as an individual and define the persona. But what rather Apple will do is Apple might take the age bracket, the region specific user feasibility. Like you sitting in US might have a requirement of iPhones, iOS 15's feature for certain perspective, where me sitting outside US might have a different requirement. So you and me individual is not targeted, but we as a community of iPhones users are targeted, right?
Oh, correct. I get it now.
Yep. So people in the 30s age bracket, or let's say in the 20s age bracket, they would use iPhone in a certain specific way, whereas people in the 60s might not use iPhone with all the tentative features, right? But iPhone as a product should have everything. you know they should also think of people who are using it at 20s and people who are also using it at 60s, right? So that personification is a background analysis just for product mapping, that what features they should keep. People at 60 might not be that tech savvy to do to send out an email compared to a person who is in the mid 20s. So as a product developer, I should see that how easily I can create this app, so that even a people at 60 can easily send out a mail using my application or using my app, right? So that's what I said, when you go into a core product development industry, you would come up with these identifications of personas.
Okay, thank you. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yep. You can take it as a customer study. So whenever Apple launches a new product in the market, right, you would be aware that they first send some prototypes, right? They try to give it to certain people or certain influencers over social media so that they use it and share their feedback. What is that? That is nothing but researching on the customer's usability and also getting a feedback on the product, right? Are there any loopholes? Is there any performance issue? Is there any charging issue? Is the internet or wi-fi technology is working better? So different level of testing goes in, right? And more of this you would see, as I am saying, into a product based company rather than into a service based company. Service based company would be mostly into creating a software and deliver it to the client and then get the benefit out of it. But product based industries go much more deeper into such analysis. Yeah, makes sense.
Makes sense. Thank you.
All right. All right. Any questions from Bilha, George, Kevin? You want to ask anything?
I have a question.
Mhm.
As we were going through the prioritization in Agile, we said it is a methodology that prioritizes customers' changing needs, um, into the project as it moves along. And you mentioned that we prioritize the customer, the individual ways of doing business rather than the processes and procedures sets. I think that was around the first or second slide. But
Okay.
sometimes you find that there's a conflict between, because the processes and the procedures are normally set by management. The processes and tools are normally set by management. And when you come to now the people who are actually implementing those processes and the ways to actually do business, now as you interact with the individuals who are actually doing it, you find that sometimes the processes are not being done as as they are written or they are passed down. So there's gonna be a kind of a conflict, and you find that now when it comes to signing off on the requirements, probably the management that are going to be signing off. So what you have collected, you see, so what you have collected will seem to be different because you are talking to the people on the ground.
Understood. See,
And
that's
now
a
you are
good
going
point.
to the management for them to sign off on these requirements. They may not.
Yes, that's a very good point. That's something called as practicality, right? Scenarios. So when you learn a functional concept, right? Let's say the agile community who would have defined it, they wanted the Agile Manifesto to have a prioritization of individuals and interactions over the processes and tools. Now it's a framework or a method that is defined in the manifesto, right? There's no bible or there is no legal agreement that companies working with agile framework needs to follow this. So that's what I said in a couple of my statements, that you might find that the whatever is defined in an agile as a concept is applied in bits and pieces in different organizations. So what you are saying is a practical and a ground reality that you as a business analyst might not be able to define that situation, that I should prioritize individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Absolutely right. So that is when we talk about, see, certain changes that comes in cannot come from an individual level in an organization. Implementation is always driven from a management or a top management level. Now, if any company who is following agile or wants the employees to follow agile, the complete top management or the CEO, or sorry, the COE, the center of excellence, they need to implement, define, and educate the employees working that this is how you should go through. Now, this four individual manifesto of agile, let's say you are working for an ex client, you are working today as a BA, you see that the scenario which you explained is not applied. They are not much into individuals and interactions. They more depend on processes and tools, but they are more cautious about giving a working product rather than documentation. So that means they are following the rule one. They're not following the rule one of Agile Manifesto, but they're strongly following the Agile rule two of Agile Manifesto. Right? So it's not that you will find all these 4 or 5 features comprehensively being followed. Some clients will go with, every company has their own business strategy model, and they have their own manifesto defined. Correct? So product based companies might not, let's say, you're working for an ex client where you see that, your manifesto number 2, what you have learned in your academics or training is what is predominantly followed, where they're least bothered about individuals or interactions. Whereas you switch your company, you go into another client. Why? They are more into, they are handling the changes of the client much better, which you did not see in your previous company, right? They're responding to changes. They have a proper change management strategy. They have a proper evaluating criteria to analyze any or every change that the client gives, and then act upon and respond that how much feasibility is there, what is the duration that they are going to take. They are handling this manifesto better, but they are very bad in customer collaboration. But eventually what happens is, whereas customer collaboration and responding to change, certain manifestos would go hand in hand. So if you are very good with dealing with customers negotiations and customer changes, that means effectively you should have a good customer collaboration, right? But that does not, responding to changes does not mean that, it is not implied that, you are prioritizing your working products over comprehensive, documentation. So certain manifesto definitions are, would go hand in hand. When you do the one, the other is automatically taking place. But it's not the case. It's not that all these 4 or 7 or 6 criteria would fit everywhere. It's that you should know the concepts, and wherever you work, wherever you as an organization, whatever criteria you understand, you would fit and adapt that. Okay, this is what I've learned and I see this is being implemented here. If there is a change, if there is an option for you to bring a change, right? I would not say every client or organizations allow you to drive changes, but there are some organizations who are very open to employees, working at different levels to suggest ideas and changes. There you might suggest that, what I see that, we are prioritizing working products over comprehensive documentation, which is a very good thing as per our agile work, but I don't see much of a customer collaboration. So you can propose from yourself to your top management that, can we have more collaboration? Can we prefer individuals interactions and bring these changes? So I don't know how it happens in every organization, but certain organizations have they ask you to set up your goals, right, for the 1 year, the year that you are going to work for them. So they give you different goal statements. One of the goal can be, how do you drive change in the business? So you as a business analyst, if you are working as a senior business analyst, or you are working as a project manager at a senior level, you would be expected to implement certain changes, and that's why they have hired you, right? So certain things might not be ready made to you in plate, right? Something might be half baked, but what is the other portion that you need to add to complete the entire dish, right? So you put in your efforts, you put in your idea, talk to your management, get it approved, get the culture change. Let them allow more customer collaboration, more individuals and interactions. So you already know that this company was more into working products and change management, very good, but they were very bad in individual interaction and customer collaboration. You as a business analyst suggested that change, it was well accepted by your organization, they bring out the change and the culture is changed. Now the plate is full. Now they're completely into all the steps of Agile Manifesto. Make sense? Yep. So everything that you learn will not be ready made, or you will not find it in practicality. Any training that you learn, let's say you are learning data science, you're learning machine learning. So whatever you learn as a technical, as a concept, might not be applied everywhere on the ground, but that doesn't mean you should conceptually also not know that piece. You should know. Unless and until you know, how do you implement something new? You cannot ideate that, okay, this is also needs to be done. So if I don't tell you about Agile Manifesto, then you are working in a firm or a company where they are more into working products and responsive to changes, but you don't know anything about Agile. Says that your customer collaboration should be good, your individual interaction should be good, you don't know about it. Then will you ever talk to your team and your teammates or your management about it? No. If you know it, you will bring it out. If you don't know it, how will you bring it out? Make sense?
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. But very good question. Good one. All right. Any other questions from anybody? We're good.
I think we're good.
Yeah, we're good.
Perfect. Bob, anything from you?
No, thank you, Paul.
All right. So we'll just quickly talk about the assignment before we wrap up. So this is your assignment 2. Okay. So what we are expecting in this assignment. So the question is utilizing the learnings about the agile methods that we have discussed. Perform an analysis about the following topics in your own words. First is team formation or team capabilities. What I want you to analyze is we have known that there are different techniques of different concepts of agile. Now, what I want you to put in this assignment is your own thoughts. That if you need to, let's say we're working on a farm which is not having agile, and they ask you that, I want your inputs to form an agile team, or if I want to develop a team with core agile capabilities, how it should be. So first is I want you to visualize and thought about it, that how I can form a team with agile capabilities. Number one. Second, product or service inception. What does that mean? If I need to develop a product or a service, or I'm sorry, if I have to develop a product or offer a service, right? And I need to do it in the methods with of agile concepts. What are the things that I should consider for a product development? And what are the things I should consider for offering a service? We are targeting both. Okay, that if you work in a product based company, you should be able to cope up. If you're working in a service based company, you should be able to cope up. Okay, so think in that way. So I would say that probably these assignments are more intellectual and read your need your functional analysis to be done. What I would encourage you is not to copy paste from any of the internet websites. Go through the concepts, reiterate, you can visit multiple sites, read blogs and everything, but try to pen down the thought process of your own. And why I'm saying this is, if you're able to apply these assignment concepts and put down your thoughts, trust me, when you are put into a situation in real time, your brain would eventually be automatically adapted to it. You will have those analytical power that, I would be able to decipher that this is what needs to be done. Okay, that's the second. And the third one is sprint based release. Okay, so I have not covered extensively about sprint basis. I want you guys to do the homework. What is sprint based releases in agile? But I have given you a hint. If you go, I'll not repeat it, you'll be conscious now. So if you go back to the recording and read it, listen to it, I would have given you concise definition of what are sprints, okay, in agile, and how it is incorporated in a software development lifecycle. So utilize this session's understanding and try to jot down your thoughts for these 3 different things. Any doubts or any questions on this, please ask. Yes, no?
Okay, so just to understand, you mean for the last, okay, so the first one is basically you want us to describe how we would form an agile team, correct?
Yep.
Okay, the second one is,
yeah, go ahead.
And then the second one is how would develop a product using the agile concept. And then the third one is,
absolutely.
and then
so there's a catch. There's a catch in the second. If you're developing a product, how would you apply the agile concepts in a product based? Let's say you think it this way. You're working for a product based firm.
Okay.
Then your concept is different. What you do this, then you switch gear and understand that now I'm working in a service based firm. I'm offering a service. Like, let's say, companies like Accenture, companies like IBM, companies like EY, Ernst & Young, they offer consulting services, right? They are not a product based company. So let's say you are working for a firm. Now you are working, let's say, for XYZ company, and your client is ABC. Now you are developing an RPA software for them, right? So that means you are not developing a product because you are not UiPath. You are using UiPath. You are creating a application, or you are developing a robot for them, but you are offering this as a service, right? But UiPath, if directly connects with that client, then it becomes product, because UiPath is the core product company. and they are offering a solution directly to their client. So whenever there's an intermediate party, it becomes a service, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So you think it in both way, that once I develop a product, how should I think? If I develop a service, how should sorry, if I offer a service, how should I think? Okay.
Okay. And the
That,
third one, is that more like just the definition of sprint? Is that
nope,
essentially
nope.
what it is?
Why
Okay.
you want to confine yourself with just a definition? How what would you do with a textbook definition? Tell me. No. Will this help you? No, right? I want
Mhm.
you to analyze these concepts, that if I'm working as a product manager or a project manager, project manager, how would I manage my sprints? And I'm not defining the sprint right now, just for the sake of this assignment. If I have to utilize sprints in my framework of agile into my project, how would I define it? How would I plan it? And how would I execute it? Think it in that way. And don't go with, and one more thing is, don't go with extensive writing. I don't want to put a word limit, but it's not that for sprint analysis you have written 3-4 pages of documentation, right? And I think you already know, as I have told you, the criteria, that your assessments are evaluated in 3 factors: your research, the amount of research that you have done, the way you are presenting, and the quality of the content that you put. So quality of content is directly proportional to the research you do. So if I understand that your quality of the content you have put is good, I automatically presume that you would have done enough research, right? So that's how it goes into. So take it in that way. Try to invoke your analytical power. See, it's not that when you are a developer or an architect you should analytically think. Even functional people think analytically, right? And that's how you should adapt to this behavior. Because why I'm making it more rigorous, because I have extensively seen over the last few years that people who are, getting into the market, or whom we are trying to place, they have been, eventually screwed in certain interviews, and the expectation of the market is dynamic. Whenever you are applying for a senior business analyst, or whenever you are applying for a senior project manager, the expectation from you is very different. And I've seen people who have multiple attempts to crack an interview, right? So from that perspective, I'm trying to make it a very rigorous, right from the beginning, that you are adapting and learning these things, so that eventually when you are done with the program, I don't want you to be in a situation where I've seen other people. That's why we are reprogramming all these concepts, because eventually you need to evolve over the period of time, right? Now, being, RPA, intelligent automation, digital technologies being hitting the market, you cannot make your screws loose. Because even for a business analyst, or for a scrum master, or for, let's say, a digital project manager, a product owner, the expectation of your functional knowledge is also very vast, right? And I would also say that this training would also not be confined. If you want to upskill more on functional, you need to go and do certain certifications as well, like, a scrum master certification, and all those things, where you have a community of scrums, like, you have scrum foundation, scrum master, who will give you the certification. You can earn the badges. It's not that this training would eventually, this training would help you to understand the concept, keep the foundation very good, and then, make yourself to that stage that you are industry ready. But if you want to upskill and, learn other concepts, you need to diverge your attention. Once you're done with this program, you should try to gain other analytical and functional knowledge, just to make your grounds more strong. Yeah. All right. So, any other questions for anyone from the assignment? If not, then I think we're good for the day. All right. So all good. Bilha, George, Kevin, right? No questions.
No, I'm good. Thank you, Paul.
Perfect. Perfect. And I hope everybody have access to your Dropbox. Kevin, did you check your Dropbox access? I think you got the access very recently. So just try
Yes,
it
I
out.
did. And yeah, and the assignment is in there as well.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, that's great. So eventually, I'll start evaluating your assignments this week onwards, and start posting the comments over there. So try to review the comments in the Dropbox that I put. That will help you to understand where you would have gone wrong, or what was the what is that something you could do better. So one more thing what I want to clarify is we don't give a chance that after the feedback you resubmit the assignment. That you can submit, but that we will not consider for the scoring part. Okay, so that's a one attempt, but yes, you can eventually go through the comment and see how, where did you lag and how can you eventually rectify it and don't repeat that. Let's say if I write that analytically you went wrong, so ensure that when you are doing the next assignment you are applying the analytical approach to define. Okay, and one more thing is don't make your assignments too lengthy. Try to have your good presentation. If you want to put certain pictures, you want to put certain tabular charts rather than a lot of lines, that makes more sense, because BA is also about, when you create business documents, it's also about the presentability, right? You create a document with 2000 3000 lines, doesn't make sense, right? You need to structure your thoughts and your documentation needs to be precise. So work on that. Read certain articles if you want, that how do you create an effective documentation or presentation. Go through certain YouTube. See, these are additional things which you need to work on yourself. If you as an individual think that, oh, I'm not good in presentation, I need to inculcate that concept, so you spend an additional time, go through certain YouTube videos. There are a lot of materials available online. Read certain documentation about effective presentation and try to imbibe that skill, because in functional domain you need to present very well. A coder is a developer is generally evaluated based on the type of standard of program or the level of code that he or she writes. Functional or business analysts are generally evaluated by the presentation, the type of documentation that you create. It's that way. Effective thought, what do you think, you need to put it on paper, right? So I want you to bring that criteria in. So if you think you are not an effective presenter, work on that and make yourself work. If you have any doubts, you can ask me, at the end of these sessions that, I have a doubt in how can I effectively present this. I would try to share my expertise or my knowledge as far as I know to enhance it for you, right? So that much we can do. You can reach out to Bob. He also can help you in bringing certain materials, or if he has any additional content, he can share it to you. So if you ask for help, see, if you are able to learn, willing to learn rather, you can ask for help. That will be benefited for you. But if you become a silent coach and just go with the flow, you'd miss out the impact of it. So that's what I would say. Yeah. All right. So I think we had a very good detailed session. I'll conclude with this. Bob, anything from your side?
No, thank you, Paul.
Okay. All right. Bob, if you can stay for a minute, rest of you all can drop off. Yeah.